Now, 5 years ago, my father, Anwar Ibrahim, delivered a speech right here on this stage entitled Half a Century of One-Party Rule. He was talking about my country, Malaysia, which has been dominated by the same party for more than 50 years. That same year here at the Oslo Freedom Forum, WikiLeaks founders spoke on the same stage as Anwar, Julian Assange. And Julian had declared, when you meet Anwar, please be careful. You see, during Julian's visit to Malaysia, he met up with my father, and just hours later, he was detained by Malaysia's Secret Service. My father, a unifying and popular figure in Malaysia's history, is seen as a very dangerous man by the UMNO party regime. When he served as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister in the 1990s, he amended the Corruption Act to further strengthen it. This, of course, displeased the political elites, and by September 1998, Mahathir Mohamad, the then Prime Minister, sacked him from government. He was then arrested after leading large-scale demonstrations, of course, also beaten under custody by the then police chief of Malaysia whilst being handcuffed and blindfolded. This was taken about a week after his beating. His eventual sentencing and trials, God knows it's been 17 years, so many trials, have been condemned worldwide by both international human rights organizations as well as governments. Initially, it was announced there were going to be 20 charges against Anwar Ibrahim. It was very popular then. The charges ranged from sodomy, treachery. There was also being an American and Israeli agent. They only forgot to throw in the kitchen sink. But other than that, Anwar was guilty. They jailed him for 6 years, much of which he spent under solitary confinement. And his trials earned Malaysia, my country, our very own International Commission of Jurists report, the very same organization that observed Mandela's flawed trials. In our case, it was entitled Justice in Jeopardy, Malaysia 2000. As I speak to you today in Oslo, Anwar, my father, and the opposition leader of Malaysia before his detention is behind bars again for the second trumped-up charges of sodomy. I have been told that in the nearly 200 speakers in this conference history, as mentioned by Thor just now, 4 are incarcerated. Nail from Bahrain, Tulani from Swaziland, and of course Leopoldo from Venezuela. So you see, the Malaysian regime keeps some very authoritarian company. Now, specifically for my father, this is his third incarceration since 1998. He is now in urgent need of medical attention. And when he was my age, this is his picture, he was a political prisoner, 22 months under the Internal Security Act. Thankfully, over the years, he grew more handsome, but no less rebellious. It's an inside joke in Malaysia. Now, the year 1998 brought the historic Asian financial crisis, and of course, the political crisis, the imprisonment of Anwar to Malaysia. Now, equally important for me, it was my very own political awakening. As a child, I wanted to be an engineer, and I would have pursued that if it wasn't for the events of 1998. So in a way, I do owe the Malaysian government thanks for getting me involved in politics. If the government did not abuse institutions, influencing judicial outcomes, rigging votes, controlling the media, it did not use force against dissenters and their political opponents, my father might still be free, and I probably be working for Shell or any other multinational companies, maybe retrenched now at the current oil prices. But the point is, different trajectory altogether. Well, now, it's not just Anwar who's Malaysia's most wanted. It is also me. It's also my colleagues in the opposition. It is also people who supported and led the movement for free and fair elections in Malaysia, and many others demanding for a more democratic and just Malaysia. See, in the last general elections, 2013, our coalition, Pakatan Rakyat, was led by Anwar Ibrahim to win as much as 52% of the popular support. But of course, we were defeated by extreme gerrymandering, malapportionment, and election fraud. The ruling government held on to power by winning more than 60% seats. There's an electoral integrity project commissioned by Harvard University and Sydney universities. They rated Malaysia, my country, as having the worst electoral district boundaries in the world. In the world. See, I mean, we hold the ranking. And the worst election rules. Now, this places Malaysia effectively alongside countries like Zimbabwe, Angola, and Egypt. The government's gerrymandering was compounded by the abuse of postal votes. Out of 222 parliamentary seats, the government won 30, almost 30, on the back of postal and early votes alone. And since those flawed elections in 2013, almost 20 members of parliament, such as myself, state legislators, have been arrested, charged, locked up, along with 150 others. Malaysians, journalists, we have cartoonists, we have students, and ordinary citizens. So now you might be thinking, how about me? What about you, Izzah? Well, growing up, I was a prefect, and like the rest of all of you here, never smoked pot in my life. Now, I played by the rules, and of course, I was a model example of a citizen, happy to get by. But of course, all that changed. All that changed when the government proceeded not only to cling over onto power, but what's more important is the corruption, the oppression, and the sheer injustice led to a Girl Scout like myself to be a second-term member of parliament and defeating 2 sitting cabinet ministers thanks to the trust of Malaysians in the pursuit of reform. In March, I was recently arrested. There's a picture of me just released. Some acne problem after overnight in the lockup. And there's me with the kids. When I found out I was arrested, I asked them to say goodbye to my children. And basically, I was arrested for speaking in parliament. So, on behalf of my father. So you have this beautiful, sunny, a prosperous Malaysia. You have the Twin Towers. It used to be the tallest buildings in the world. Yeah? Yet, no parliamentary immunity for members of parliament. So MPs can be arrested for sedition. Now, the whole experience of being a prisoner has taught me a lot. We have lockup rules that are 67 years old. We love to protect and preserve these British colonial relics. And of course, I spent the night with many other colleagues sleeping on the floor just to be asked questions like, you referred to a devil in your speech. Who was this devil you were referring to? See, I had condemned the federal court judges in my father's case for having sold their souls to the devil. I said this because Malaysia is in dire need of judicial reform. And we are fighting, along with for electoral reform, a more multiracial Malaysia where diversity must and is seen as a strength, not something that divides us. Now, reformists in my country are actually Malaysia's most wanted. Why? Because we hold the key to the future, to the zeal for reform. Malaysia's most wanted are those who clamor for an end to the unequal distribution of wealth, against corruption, extravagance, and Malaysia's most wanted are those who despair, like myself, when our children receive low educational standards, and in the PISA rankings, we were once surpassed by Vietnam. So Malaysia's most wanted are also those who reject the use of racial and religious rhetoric to scare indigenous Malays into voting for status quo. And Malaysia's most wanted are those who realize anti-terrorism laws are often just guises to detain political dissenters in the names of security and stability. Malaysia's most wanted are sick to the bone with failed governance and mammoth financial scandals. Most recently, the controversial government investment fund, 1MDB. Where's Mr. Burgess? If Angola, Nigeria has SAMPA, Malaysia also has our very own SAMPA. And here he is with none other than Paris Hilton. Do you know who Paris Hilton is? So anyway, Malaysia's most wanted are also the younger generation of Malaysia who voted as high as 88% in the Permatang Pauh elections, by-elections. My father's seat, Permatang Pauh, he lost upon his conviction, has been now retained by our party, the People's Justice Party, despite the enormous challenges put up by the government. And Malaysia's most wanted will not give up. Just last week, my mother, when Aziza was chosen by the opposition coalition as the opposition leader of Malaysia, they certainly cannot lock all of us up, even if the messenger remains behind bars, even if Anwar is imprisoned, his agenda for reform will continue. And we know that the world will not just see Malaysia for the Petronas Twin Towers. What of the future then? I believe very firmly it belongs to Malaysia's most wanted. It belongs to us who will ensure that reforms take place in Malaysia, that we become more democratic, fulfill our potential. And because of that, for me, the clarion call of reformasi, reform, must continue to be carried by every person loving Malaysia, wanting the best for Malaysia. I end by thanking all of you and the OFF for supporting Malaysians' effort to continue to live in truth. Thank you very much.